I'm filmmaker Kevin Hirschner.
And I'm music producer Chris Sangster.
This is Scenes and Songs. Welcome, I'm Kevin Hirschner, and you're watching Scenes and Songs, the show that dissects outstanding movie and music pairings.
And I'm Chris Sangster. Each episode, we pick one scene and one song to break down for you. On this episode, we're talking about Creed.
So full disclosure for anyone watching, Rocky is my favorite movie of all time. It holds a very special place in my heart. And when they announced that this movie Creed was going to be coming out, I was super excited to see it. But I was also a little nervous, as anyone who's a big fan of something, that it wouldn't maybe live up to the expectations I had for it. But this movie totally, completely meets my expectations, and I would say probably exceeds it. And a big reason that it does that is because of the way they utilize music. And one of our favorite scenes in Creed is from the iconic training montage.
That's right, and this scene features the song Lord Knows by Meek Mill. And right from the beginning of the creative process, the filmmakers knew that they had to get a song from Meek for the movie. Being a native Philadelphian and also an amazing rapper, Meek was the perfect choice to soundtrack Creed's training montage. So let's head over to the screening room so Kevin can break down the film for you.
Ryan Coogler's Creed was released on November 25th, 2015. The film is either the 7th installment of the Rocky franchise or the first of the Creed franchise, depending on how you want to look at it. The original Rocky franchise is about the life of Rocky Balboa, an underdog boxer from Philadelphia who eventually becomes the heavyweight champion of the world, stretched out over 30 years. Each film was written by and stars Sylvester Stallone as the titular character. Coogler, a longtime fan of the franchise, originally pitched the idea of a spin-off to series creator Stallone in 2011. However, Stallone passed on the idea. So instead, Coogler set out to make his directorial debut Fruitvale Station. The film is based on the true story of a young black man who was killed by police officers in Coogler's hometown of Oakland, California. The film was the first of many collaborations between Coogler and lead actor Michael B. Jordan. It's also important to note that Coogler himself is a young black man. Now, what Coogler may have lacked in professional experience was more than made up for due to the writer-director's unique perspective and specific point of view. The independent film was a surprise success and caught the attention of Stallone, who now felt like Coogler was ready to carry the mantle of the Rocky franchise. Coogler immediately set out to craft the story of Adonis Creed, a young black man, and the illegitimate son of Rocky's greatest rival and greatest friend Apollo Creed, the most famous fighter of all time, who before Adonis was born was infamously killed in the ring. Although, or maybe because Adonis never met his father, he yearns to follow in his father's footsteps and become a fighter. So he travels to Philadelphia in order to train under Rocky, who reluctantly becomes his mentor. Adonis shows promise as a fighter, and eventually word of his famous bloodline gets out. Adonis's famous name gets him an unlikely shot in the World Light Heavyweight Championship, and he enthusiastically but cautiously accepts the challenge. Adonis, similar to the central character of Coogler's first feature, is an interesting mix of self-assuredness and self-consciousness. Throughout his journey in the film, he grapples with both the legacy and shadow his famous father left behind for him. The entire story hinges on whether Adonis really has what it takes to create his own legacy, or, if in the character's own words, he's just a mistake. In this instance, it's not hard to draw comparisons between the feelings of our protagonists with the feelings of the filmmaker himself. Hopping in the driver's seat of one of the most enduring film franchises in the history of cinema would be a daunting task for any filmmaker, let alone one with only one film under their belt. Tasked with the daunting mission of both honoring the legacy of and breathing new life into the beloved franchise, Coogler leaned on the strengths that made his first film such a success: his unique perspective and his specific point of view. Coogler's naturally ingrained, straightforward but empathetic brand of storytelling would be the perfect perspective from which to tell the story of Adonis. And the fact that a black storyteller would be telling the story of a black protagonist, an unfortunate rarity in the history of cinema, would also be integral to the point of view of this film. But the story of Adonis would still have to fit into the larger universe that was created before the filmmaker was even born, in a city in which the filmmaker had never lived. On this film, Coogler couldn't fall back on a lifetime of experiences in order to fully realize an authentic lived-in voice, as he could on his previous film, which was set in his hometown. But just like Adonis, Coogler would not be all alone on his journey. As Adonis races towards the climactic moment when we and he will learn if he really has what it takes to be great, he enlists the help of several Philadelphia locals. Likewise, Coogler employs both elements of the original franchise's score and a slew of Philadelphia musicians to create a specific atmosphere. From the beginning of the film, Adonis's character growth is meticulously matched by the music, which grows in parallel. Adonis and the music come to a head in one of the standout set pieces of the film, Adonis's final training montage. Rocky's training montage from the franchise's first film, set to Bill Conti's original song, Gonna Fly Now, is one of the most iconic moments in the Rocky franchise and the history of cinema. Coogler was out to pay homage to the original while also putting his own fresh stamp on the material, just like Adonis. In order to accomplish this seemingly impossible feat, Coogler would have to use a song that matched both his vision and his ambitions. Now let's head over to the studio so Chris can break down the song for you.
Our song this week is Lord Knows by Meek Mill. But technically, the song in the scene is a mashup between Lord Knows and original music by the film's score composer Ludwig Goransson. Goransson is a longtime collaborator of Ryan Coogler's, going back to their days at USC. He's scored all of Coogler's films, but is also the producer behind Childish Gambino. You might have seen him recently accept the Grammy Awards for This Is America. He has this really interesting place in the modern music industry where he lives in both of these worlds, as a hip-hop producer and as a films composer, and it's a really interesting thing he's got going on, but I think it made him the perfect person to score Creed. Our scene starts with Goransson's original Creed score, which is behind these scenes of Adonis getting ready for his fight with Pretty Ricky Conlon, but they're mirrored with these images of Rocky's battle with cancer. And it's really great. It really sets the emotional stakes of the film and really sets up this battle that both of them are going on right now. And the score music is equally as epic and intense, and it really works and it feels great. But then we get this switch when Adonis goes outside to start running. We drop the score and we just get a solitary 808 kick drum playing what I'll call the running theme of Creed. It's something like this. It's repeated a lot of times throughout Creed, and you can think of it as the running theme or possibly the boxing theme. It kind of maybe sounds like a boxer hitting the bag, but it's a very athletic rhythm, and it's used a lot to great effect in Creed. And in this scene, we have it on a solitary 808 kick drum, which is then followed by Meek Mill's verse from Lord Knows coming in. And all that Goransson has used from Lord Knows is just Meek Mill's vocal. In the original song, we have this halftime trap beat with machine gun roll hi-hats, a Mozart sample. It's a Requiem Lacrimosa, which is fantastic, but we don't have it here in the film. And we also leave Tory Lanez, who sings the hook on the song. We leave all that behind, and we replace it with this 4 on the floor beat, this very driving beat, and the orchestral strings and horns behind it. So it really marries these two worlds, the fantasy aspect of cinema with this real gritty Philadelphia street narrative, and it just marries those two things perfectly together, all with Meek Mill on top of it. And it's only 17 bars of his gargantuan 44-bar first verse, but they've specifically picked the beginning and the end of the verse to amplify Adonis's running and the way that his training gets harder and harder, and he goes harder and harder as the scene progresses. And that's mirrored with the way Meek's verse lines up. So they pick the beginning of the verse, which is kind of laid back, a bit braggadocious, emphasizing the eighth notes more. And then they cut out a whole big segment of the middle, the 44 bars, and they go right to the end, where Meek is just hitting us over the head with those triplets. Ba-da-da, 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 ba-da. And it really just feels like you're running and punching and running and punching. It just gives this great momentum to what you're seeing Adonis do on screen. It just matches up so perfectly, and it just takes that energy to this peak point. And then we drop all the way down. It just sucks everything out, And we get Jhené Aiko's vocals coming in. It sounds really beautiful, and it's Goransson's Fighting Stronger theme. But it's very, very reminiscent of Bill Conti's Gonna Fly Now, the original Rocky music. However, they are most certainly different. Goransson has ingeniously created a new theme for Creed that sounds like so much like the next evolution of the Rocky theme that many, many people actually mistake it for the Rocky music. But check it out. I'm going to play them both now, and you can see that they are very different. I'll start with the famous one, Gonna Fly Now. And now Creed's theme. So when you hear them back to back, you can tell those are different melodies, those are different songs. But the reason they feel so similar is because A, they have the same instrumentation, a beautiful vocal, female vocal, and lush strings with modern drums. Bill Conti's modern drums were disco drums. Ludwig Goransson's modern drums are hip-hop beats, but they still marry those two worlds and they still have the same melodic instrumentation. They also use a similar rhythmical structure. They kind of have this broken arpeggio thing going on, but even more than that, they use the same set of notes. They only use the white keys on the piano, the black keys on this guy, and none of the black keys, aka the white keys on my piano. So even though the songs are in different keys, they use all the same notes, all the same instrumentation, and a lot of the same rhythms. And so it makes it feel like they live in the same world. And that's what Goransson was trying to do, create something for Adonis that could live right alongside Rocky, but be unique for Adonis. And that's really kind of mirrors the story of Adonis Creed himself. He's trying to find himself. He's trying to become Adonis Creed throughout this film. And that's mirrored with the way Goransson develops the score. And by the end of the scene, we have Adonis outside Rocky's house, shadowboxing with all the guys circling him on the dirt bikes, and all of this music, both the hip hop elements and the score themes, all playing together at the same time. And it just amps you up so much. You're just ready to get in the ring and duke it out like Rocky Balboa or Adonis Creed. So now let's head over to the Nook so we can break down this great scene even more for you. So obviously this scene has a lot of great parallels to the original Rocky film. The first one that I noticed right off the bat is that they both wear gray sweatsuits, right? Adonis has a Jordan brand one that looks like new and fresh and really cool, and Rocky has an old thrift store one and a dish towel around his neck.
Which works perfectly because Rocky is an old thrift store dish towel.
And Adonis Creed is kind of a rich kid. So it does work perfectly, but it's an obvious callback, I think, the gray sweatsuit look.
Yeah. One of my other favorite callback from that training montage is they have those pretty much identical shots of each of them running through the Italian market in Philadelphia.
Right, yeah. It's almost a shot-for-shot recreation of that scene.
But we're not going to walk through the entire training montage. It's amazing. You should definitely watch it. You should watch the original. They both hold up so well. But the main parallel that we really appreciated that they brought to this story is that they're both kind of showing that these are, the quote unquote people's champions. They're crowned in the streets, and it's the training that really matters to them. I saw a comment on YouTube of a comment on this training montage, and they talked about the genius of how you hear that bell sound, that big dong bell,
right, yeah,
because
yeah.
it sounds like the bell that starts a fight. And it was
Yes.
it was saying, hey, this is where the fight started for Creed. It started right here.
Exactly.
Didn't start in the ring. It started in training.
And that bell is also used in the song Going the Distance from the original Rocky film, which is the song that plays after the fight is over. So it happens in most of the Rocky films at the end of fights. Gonna Fly Now is the one at the beginning that everyone knows, but then Going the Distance is kind of the end one, and it has that same bell sound, the exact same sound.
And they just did a fantastic job of, we've been going over this a million times already, but of paying homage to the original, but putting their own fresh stamp on it. Obviously, visually the most striking aspect of their new stamp is these Philly kids on their dirt bikes,
Right,
which
yeah.
makes it feel really fresh and current and real, though, because that is an actual thing that kids
absolutely.
are in with Philly. Then the other, that's the kind of the visual update.
Mm-hmm.
The audio update is obviously the song.
Right, yeah. The new version of the Rocky music, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Fighting Stronger, technically, now in this one. It's by Ludwig Goransson. And as I said in my segment, it's a beautiful update of the Rocky music, but it's original for Creed. So it lives in the same world, but it gives Adonis Creed his own voice, which I feel like that's what the film is doing. The only big difference, I think, between Gonna Fly Now and Lord Knows is that Gonna Fly Now has 30 total words and Lord Knows gets to the 30th word by the 5th bar of the song. And it has a total of 157 words in the first verse alone.
We didn't look this up. We should have looked it up, but I'm gonna guess that the 30 words of Gonna Fly Now, that's probably got to be the song with the least number of words to ever be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Song.
I think that is absolutely factually correct.
I would imagine. But at the end of the day, it's the same message.
Absolutely.
Whether it's 30 words or 157 words.
Right.
It's these aspirational lyrics, but it's Bill Conti is saying it in his way,
Mm-hmm.
and Meek Mill is saying it in his way. And it works so well because Meek Mill is such a talented rapper. We're not going to go through, I don't think anyone out there listening wants us to read off every lyric of this song from either the version in Creed or the full version, which is like a crazy 50-bar verse. It's insane.
44-bar first verse. Yes, it's quite long, but definitely go listen to it. It's awesome.
But there are some lyrics that we thought just worked so perfectly that we wanted to talk about. So
Yeah,
Chris is going to give you some of his favorite lyrics from this.
Yeah, I think looking at the lyrics that Ludwig and Ryan Coogler chose to use in our scene, a few of them I think are really, really spot on and really purposeful. So right at the beginning, we get this one that's, "Remember I prayed, really I wished for this, to get the crib with the maid and the picket fence." That's had really aspirational ideals, all of these aspirational
This
ideals.
American dream.
Exactly, this American dream thing that's shared by Meek and Rocky and Adonis and all of these people, right? They all share this common aspirational hope and ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I think is interesting just from the story of Meek Mill is "Lord knows I repent for this, but Lord knows if I get pinned for this, I probably won't get home until I'm 56." Which is a great little bit of lyrical wordplay, just talking about his real life legal troubles, which unfortunately still follow him to this day,
and which have also a lot of parallels to the character of Adonis and some of his
absolutely, his
legal
legal
battles as a child.
Right, yeah, for sure. So there's that one. Moving later in the song, after they've done this massive edit where they take out kind of like on more than half of the middle bit of the verse, and they go to the end of the verse when Meek really starts to pick up his flow, and he says, "Difference between me and most of these rappers, I'm talking about work that I really put in," which is great because we have the double entendre of work meaning to deal drugs, but also we see Adonis actually putting in literal hard work on the screen, right? He's actually working out his body. So it's a double entendre in the rap lyric, but it's also, taken to the next level when you see it paired with that visual. And then finally, I think the one that, I don't know, maybe if Kevin we're reading a little too much into, or if this is the most genius lyrical and scene pairing of all time, but the very last lyric, and this is not the last lyric of the verse in the song, but the last lyric of the verse in the movie
that we hear
is, "And I'm talking about foreigns I really could whip." And obviously Meek Mill is talking about driving foreign automobiles, but you could make the case that the double entendre is that Adonis Creed is about to whoop up on a foreigner, Pretty Ricky Conlon.
Yeah, Pretty Ricky Conlon from England.
Right.
And there's when you watch this whole movie, there's a lot of moments that maybe if you're a cynic, you'd say, hey, these were happy accidents. Like maybe that was just a happy accident that they cut this verse up and it just happened to end on talking about foreigns I really could whip. I prefer to believe that they're musical genius moments that happen all throughout this movie on the soundtrack. So we have a list of our top 5 moments that we want to break down. Before that, I do have to give honorable mention. This didn't make our top 5, it just barely made out, but there's a deleted scene at the end of Creed after the credits. It's a post-credit scene of Frank Stallone and the boys singing "Take You Back" on the street corner. It's the best. It's pretty much the best part of the scene. Chris told me not to say that joke, and I said it anyway.
I think.
But so let's give our actual list.
That is awful.
The movie could have used more Frank Stallone. Can we agree on that?
Agree to disagree
all
on the
right.
Frank Stallone comments. That's all I'll say about that.
The countdown may begin.
5.
Number 5 for me is "The Fire" by The Roots and John Legend, which is an awesome song. I absolutely love that song. But it's 2 Philly artists, right? The Roots and John Legend, both at Philly roots, and it plays right as Adonis gets to Philadelphia. It's like drone shots of Philly, basically, with this song playing. And so, it's very appropriate to bring us to the world of Philadelphia with this song, but it also, the lyrics again parallel Adonis's struggle. He's got the fire inside him, and he's going to chase his dreams. So it works on both levels there.
4.
So the number 4 moment for us is when Adonis enters the ring for the final fight, comes to a Tupac song, Hail Mary. Adonis is from LA, Tupac is from LA. It's a nice little touch.
3.
Number 3 is "Bridging the Gap" by Nas. It's during the first training sequence. It doesn't actually really play into the geographical ideas so much like these other ones, but it does represent that idea of bridging the gap, which I think is something that is really stated a lot in this movie, bridging the gap between the Rocky films and the Creed films, bridging the gap between the 2 generations, or just Creed, Adonis himself, bridging the gap between Adonis Johnson and Adonis Creed.
Yeah, and a big part of the movie is about fathers and sons and bridging that gap. And this song by Nas features his actual father, who's also a musician, singing on it.
That's crazy. I didn't know that at first. You told me that, and that blew my mind. But that's so awesome. What an awesome song. And
another kind of interesting little tidbit is that song was also featured in the movie A Prophet, which, according to Ryan Coogler in a roundtable discussion with The Hollywood Reporter, he said A Prophet is one of his favorite movies of all time. He says he watches it before he is going to start production on any of his films. So I thought that was a great little nod that he used the same song from that.
2.
So number 2 of one of our favorite moments from this is when Pretty Ricky Conlon comes in. They played a Tupac song for Adonis Creed. Right. They played a UK grime song for him, which works perfectly. It's by the group called Krept and Conan. And one of the things when we were doing research on this that we discovered is that Conan of Krept and Conan, his father is a famous musician named Delroy Wilson, who died when Conan was only 5 years old. I don't know if all that was intentional and if that was meaningful, but I thought that was an interesting parallel between the life of Adonis Creed, who never knew his father. This guy lost his father at a very young age.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe it's a happy accident, but I think that's an amazing parallel.
1.
The best music scene for us, save the training montage, obviously, is "Wake Up Everybody" by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. And it's used by Rocky to wake Adonis up early in the morning to start his training. It's right when Adonis has moved into Rocky's house, and Rocky's waking him up to 5 a.m. or whatever to start really going hard on the training. And Rocky wakes him up by blasting
"Wake Up Everybody."
"Wake Up Everybody."
Which it's great that Rocky is playing "Wake Up Everybody" to wake him up. But the thing that we realized later was that, one, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes are from Philadelphia, just like the Roots and Meek Mill and John Legend. And this song was released in November of 1975, which is the exact month when Rocky Balboa in the original Rocky was woken up by this opportunity to fight Apollo Creed.
Right. It's the month he got the request to fight
Apollo.
That
he got the offer, which I just thought that was amazing. And I read an earlier version of the script where they used the Spinners instead of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes.
Okay.
And at some point they update it, and it just works absolutely perfectly.
It's so good. I also heard that originally Coogler wanted Rocky to throw a bucket of water on Adonis Creed to wake him up, but Sly Stallone said that is not something that Rocky Balboa would do. And because...
Which is so right. Yes.
And because Ryan Coogler is a smart man, he listened to Rocky Balboa's advice on what Rocky Balboa would say. And Sly said that he would probably wake him up by playing an old record. And so they rewrote the scene to become this scene with "Wake Up Everybody," which is it works a million times better than if he had thrown a bucket of water.
Well,
on him.
it's such a more personal touch that, like, of course, I mean, I can totally understand why Ryan Coogler would come up with, yeah, he throws a bucket of water on him. That makes for a good scene, but like, no. But then you think about it, of course, Rocky Balboa wouldn't do that. Yeah, you just play a song,
right? Yeah.
And that's kind of the secret, I mean, not so secret, but secret, not so secret key to all of these movies is that they all just have this personal touch. They all just feel so lived in.
More so than that, they have these super emotionally complex and deep moments in and amongst a lot of cheese. You know, I mean, the Rocky films, especially the sequels, are super campy.
Drama.
Yeah.
High drama.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. Call it what you will. But there really are these amazingly deep emotional moments like hidden within that stuff. One of my all-time favorites, maybe my favorite line from the entire Rocky franchise, is in Rocky 1 when Rocky's asked why he likes Adrian. And he replies, I don't know. She got gaps. I got gaps. Together we fill gaps. And it's so Rocky, but it's so beautiful and it's so deep and it's so perfect. And it's little moments like that really make these films feel so real to life.
Yeah. And Coogler did an amazing job of carrying that tradition.
Yeah,
unfortunately, you know, with this podcast focusing on the scene and song, we didn't get to dive too super deeply into the relationship between Adonis and Bianca, which feels so real and lived in.
Yeah.
And we could do an entire podcast on that. The one thing I will say is that I thought it was amazing to kind of follow along with our point of how they use music to create atmosphere, is that Adonis is really kind of this fish out of water. And his de facto tour guide of the city is Bianca.
Sure, a musician.
Who is a musician.
Right.
And a lot of the things she connects with him is about music and about music venues in the area and where she's performing. And I think that just played
she even makes a song
so
for
well.
him, right? When they get it on for the first time, it's because she's made this song for him.
That
and plays it
apparently
for him.
Tessa Thompson, the actress who plays Bianca, helped write with
Correct,
the composer Ludwig.
with Ludwig,
Goransson.
exactly. Yeah, she's a co-writer on all of the original Bianca music. Yeah,
and just the way they just Coogler and Stallone in the past have just layered in these great authentic touches so subliminally. It just makes the movies feel so real. I mean, and you don't have to know these things for it to work. Like, you don't have to know that Ryan Coogler previously worked in a juvenile detention center before he became a filmmaker to feel it feels like an authentic experience.
Yeah, and in the opening scene where we're in a juvenile detention center.
Like, you don't have to know that, but clearly he was drawing off these personal inspirations.
Sure,
and embedding that into the story. And where it was areas that he couldn't fully relate, that's when he turned, especially in this scene, to Meek Mill.
Right. Exactly. Who imbued the movie and the scenes specifically with this very authentic voice of Philadelphia. You know, Ryan Coogler is from Oakland, so he can't authentically speak with the voice of a Philadelphian. So like you said, in those moments where he needs that, he got an authentic person to fill those shoes. And Meek Mill, I think, was so perfect for this movie and this scene because of his Philadelphia roots, but also because of his legal troubles and how he's had to struggle throughout his life. And, you know, I mean, a little brief rundown for those that don't know. Meek Mill was arrested in 2007 and charged in 2008 with illegally carrying a firearm. This was his first run-in with Judge Janice Brinkley, who's kind of been his nemesis, for lack of a better term, in the subsequent decade. By all accounts that I've read, like, she's honestly just like a rotten person and kind of makes examples of people unnecessarily, and has really made an example of Meek and just cited him with numerous probation violations, mostly due to his hectic touring schedule and him not being able to provide his whereabouts at all times because he's a touring musician. Then that's difficult. And to this day, I mean, Meek Mill is no longer incarcerated for this, but he is still dealing with the fallout of these legal troubles. Like, this whole case is not over still in 2019, which is insane.
He's still on. I mean, I've heard. I mean, I remember hearing him in an interview recently saying where he's like, "You guys don't get it. Like, I've been on probation since I was 18 years old."
Basically his entire adult life, which is insane when you think about that. And also has become a very successful musician as well.
And, you know, most famously, he a few years ago was incarcerated before breaking his probation because he was doing wheelies on a dirt bike in New York City.
Yeah,
which,
it's kind of an unfortunate coincidence, if you will, for the scene that his song is used in Creed, because we obviously have all the young kids doing wheelies on dirt bikes and four-wheelers and doing that whole thing, which is a very authentic part of Philadelphia street culture that I think was a wonderful addition by Ryan Coogler to use in Creed. But yeah, in 2017, while in New York for an appearance on The Tonight Show, Meek was just like riding down the street and saw some kids riding dirt bikes, yelled out to him, was like, "Hey, you mind if I hop on?" They were like, obviously, let him. He hops on, does some wheelies. You know, I think it was his manager, someone on his team, took a video, posted on Instagram Live, and, you know, next thing you know, NYPD showing up at his door and arrested him for reckless endangerment. You know, the charge was reduced to a misdemeanor and it was dismissed, but Brinkley, this judge, you know, found him in violation of his probation and he had to go back to jail for this, which is, like we said, a really unfortunate coincidence that parallels our scene.
that happened after this movie came out.
Right, yeah. That happened in 2017. Yeah, the movie in 2015.
Sad foreshadowing. But apparently this is something Meek Mill has been doing since he was a little kid. Pusha T of Clips recently in an interview said that there's an old Clips music video where a very young 13, 14-year-old Meek Mill is doing a wheelie on a dirt bike.
Yeah.
Which is just,
that's crazy.
He's been doing this. It's baked in to who he is and what he does.
Yeah, it's really like it's his favorite pastime. I read this Fader article where he was talking about how the only time he truly feels free in life is when he's out on a dirt bike just tearing it up, and that's his release. You know, he's a full-time musician. You know, music is not his release; it's his job. So his hobby, his pastime, is riding dirt bikes. That's what he likes to do.
And that's kind of similar to a few things Adonis Creed says in the movie, where it's just, this is baked in. This is who I am. This is what I have to do. I have to fight. Yeah. And so that's why this song selection is so genius, that Meekville evokes the spirit of Philadelphia and the spirit of Adonis Johnson, which I think a lot of people, especially as the second film has now come out, and it's easy to forget when you're watching the movie and you get engrossed on whether or not Adonis Johnson is going to be ready for this fight. You forget about his kind of humble background. It's the very first scene is him as a kid in juvenile detention.
He's already fighting.
He's been orphaned. He eventually gets taken in and has this better life, but that's something that very much sticks with him. And I don't think that was an accident that Ryan Coogler chose to build this character like this, by this person who's kind of towed both lines of the legal system.
Sure, yes, like Meek Mill.
Similar to Meek Mill. And a couple years ago, there was this really good Steven Spielberg documentary on HBO that came out. Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas it kind of throws out there is that all these great directors have this initial wound that all of their great art comes from. In Spielberg's case, it's that he's a child of divorce, and that's something that's always stuck with him.
Mm-hmm. And is that the root of their creative output?
Maybe not necessarily the root, but it always is kind of there.
It's always informing it,
kind of nagging and informing it. And I was thinking about Ryan Coogler, who has definitely established himself as a great director, and I was thinking about kind of the similarities between his first film, Fruitvale Station, his second film, Creed, and his third film, Black Panther. All of these films
Are great.
Are great. And they're all about the protagonist is a young black man who could, aside from a few different circumstances, easily fallen on one side or the other. Essentially this idea that for a lot of people, it's a coin flip.
Right, on whether you're going to make it out, so to speak, or whether you're going to fall victim to the drug game or the legal system or any number of more
obstacles out
there. Right,
and
people like this face.
I even found this old article of Ryan Coogler when he was 21, 22 years old, when he was about to head off to film school at USC. It was an article with the Eastbay Times. And he straight up said, my parents went to college, so I went to college.
Right.
But if my dad was a drug dealer, I would have been a drug dealer. He says, the reason I'm here now standing proud of my mom and dad, take them away, and my story could have been one you hear all the time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I want to use the term survivor's remorse for Ryan Coogler. But I think he's presenting it from this idea that within the society that we live in, it can be tough for young black men. And sometimes it is as simple as a flip of a coin of whether or not
side of that line you fall on. And I mean, look at a guy like Meek Mill. I think that's another reason that Meek is the perfect choice for this, is that I don't think any MC has towed that line more publicly in recent years than Meek Mill. Like, obviously, he's lived a very public life as a very famous musician, but also been incarcerated during a lot of that time, which is insane. And it's really unfortunate because I think Meek will never know if he could have. I mean, he's no doubt one of the most talented rappers of his generation, but he'll never know if he could have had the commercial success of a Drake or the artistic success of a Kendrick Lamar, because he's had all of these roadblocks along the way. He's had to go to jail for months and years stretches of times when these other artists were working on their art, and he wasn't allowed to do that because of this really crappy thing that happened to him, this really crappy turn of the legal system that's just worked against him for basically his whole adult life. And so I think Meek is the kind of the embodiment of this idea from a rapper standpoint anyway.
And I think it's just so, genius or empathetic or just thoughtful of Ryan Coogler to bring in a guy like Meek Mill to do this. I mean, he's, from all accounts I've heard, Ryan Coogler is just a super humble guy. I even saw an interview where apparently one of Michael B. Jordan's favorite things to do is to compliment Ryan Coogler in front of crowds of people to just see him squirm and get uncomfortable. But that's one of the marks of why he's such a great filmmaker. Right. I remember hearing a quote from him that I'm paraphrasing right now, but it was along the lines of, hey, we're all prisoners to our own purview. And he has this gift of opening his eyes and listening
to others
and taking it in. And his perspective is so empathetic and so free of judgment. And I think that's what really helps us as the viewer be able to watch the film, take it in, learn, and it creates this conducive atmosphere that I think is one of the important and strongest parts of viewing a film.
Absolutely. And I think also he keeps it very authentic with using Meek Mill, and specifically in this scene. The Rocky training montage is something that's very, very famous and parodied millions of times. So I think it could have easily not worked so well to try to recreate that with Adonis Creed. But by using an updated version of the scene and by using Meek Mill, it works. It just works perfectly, and it gives the character of Adonis Creed something new and unique to say for himself, but that also follows perfectly with what Rocky has had to say.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Scenes and Songs. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Scenes and Songs. Subscribe on YouTube, like on Facebook, or for audio only, subscribe wherever podcasts are sold.
To get in contact with us, please send us an email at scenes_songs@gmail.com. That's scenes, AMPERSAND, songs@gmail.com. Check out our next episode where we break down Chris Kelly's Other People featuring the song Drops of Jupiter by Train.